So today is about weight. And there are three key words that I want to highlight when it comes to weight and weight assignments. It's just things that you want to or should think about, and partly when you start looking at your reference. The first one is balance. So when we talk about balance, it's always about keeping the balance in the body. How do we show balance in weight or changes in weight, right? So let me quickly demonstrate. If we imagine a character standing, very, very simple, very neutral. That works. It's a very, very neutral, perfectly standing, resting position for a human. We can obviously do more with a pose like this, but that's quite not the point right now. If we give this character something like a suitcase, it can be as simple as this. This works. But this suitcase is not heavy. Why? Because the balance has not shifted, right? The moment we enter something that has a lot of weight into the system, that is the body, it becomes part of this character in a way, right? So if you think about without this thing, his center of gravity is here, of the body. That won't change, even if he has something in his hand, theoretically. But his base of support or area of support is here, right? And this, all the weight is right above it, because that's, okay, it's a very static pose, makes sense. The moment we enter an additional thing into the system that he's holding, like something heavy, the weight that is here is a little bit off balance. So his center of gravity, including this thing, will shift to the right a little bit, right? So when we talk about balance, if this thing is really, really heavy, what would need to happen? The whole body needs to shift the other way. It's an opposing action. It's a counterbalancing, basically. So what we'll end up with is something that is, if it's a really heavy suitcase, it has to be something maybe a little bit more like this, like where the character is actually really, really bent. Maybe it's even so heavy that it affects his whole body a little bit. And now highlighting it again. This is a lot heavier because now this shifts the center of gravity so much that the center of gravity, including the heavy suitcase, needs to be over this area of support, right? And by additionally pulling down the shoulder a little bit, we can show more emphasis on how it actually affects the body, not just the overall weight shift, but also the pull of the shoulder, maybe a little bit of tension in the overall body. And with this, obviously, comes a lot of other things, like the character won't be able to move as smoothly because he cannot go left and right so much, because if he goes too far left, he would fall over right away. If he goes too far right, he would also fall over. And overall, he won't be able to move that much because the area of support needs to be underneath the suitcase a little bit more, right? So he has less flexibility. So that's what we mean by balance. And a lot of that will be very, very obvious and very visible just by our key poses. The other one, and that is less visible in simple posing, will be effort. So effort is just how much energy do we need to introduce into the system to move the mass around, right? How much effort do we need to put into holding this object in our arms if it's really, really heavy? And the effort will mostly be visible in the timing and on how we go from one pose to the next. Best example is always if you lift something really heavy or if you move something really, really heavy, it will not be able to start moving very, very fast. But I want to kind of reduce the misconception sometimes that a heavy object can be, of course, fast, right? It's kind of a lot of people think, oh, we have a giant kaiju, we have a giant Godzilla monster. They are huge, so they are really heavy, so they're slow. And we can only move them in slow motion. That's not what is happening. Something that is really, really big, really, really heavy, has a lot of mass, can still move super fast. But what it cannot do is change direction really fast. And something that is not moving and that is starting to move, if it is really heavy, it needs a longer time than something that is light. That's why a fly can zip around like this, And an eagle will never be able to do that, so he's gliding more, and he needs more energy to actually go left and right to kind of change direction, right? What does this mean for our specific assignment here? When we lift something, well, if you want to show that it is really heavy, don't pick it up fast. It won't work. It will always look very light. So you want to make sure that you have, the body might be doing something fast, like trying to lift it, but the actual object will react very slowly and slowly accelerate into a pose. Same when it's on top. If you have a really heavy object that you hold, it doesn't fall faster than a lighter object. So if you have something like a balloon, obviously it doesn't fall as fast, but that's mostly because air resistance becomes a factor once it's really, really light. But if you have a tennis ball and a bowling ball and you drop them, they pretty much drop at the exact same rate. So don't feel like just because it's heavy, it needs to fall faster. No, you want to do the same thing where if you let go, it still has a little bit of hang time and it starts falling. But the difference is if the character catches it again, he won't be able to stop it quickly either. It will still continue falling. And that's a big difference between a tennis ball and a bowling ball. Right? If a bowling ball falls and you try to catch it, it's going to be really, really hard because of all the inertia that comes with the mass. So effort is just something that we really want to highlight when we pick up something, when we move something, and when we change direction, especially with the heavy object. And the last one is force, and it kind of falls into this a little bit, but with force, we want to make sure that we really sell the energy of this heavy object, right? So if it comes to a stop, it should come to a stop very, very clearly. If it's falling, if it has hang time, we have to make sure that the force that the object is exerting onto other objects, like the body, is clearly visible. Another thing could be straight arms, for example, if you hold something, because straight arms basically distribute the force into the upper body, versus if you have bent arms, most of the force needs to be exerted by the upper arm, which is not as strong as our back, because overall the muscle is way smaller, right? So we have to make sure that we sell those pulls and those pushes, depending on how we lift the object, by, for example, our posing, like where we show our straights versus our curves. Also when we lift a heavy stone or like a ball up the ground, what are we going to do with our spine? How do we show the forces that the spine and the back muscles are actually using to lift the object? So do we curl it first? Do we reverse it? Do we straighten it up? All of those things. It will be very obvious once you look at your reference, but I want you to take an extra look at those forces that are at work to understand what is exactly happening and how we can actually exaggerate those elements to make it feel even heavier and a little bit more stylized, a little bit more cartoony.